Good evening. Tonight is the Rishner's Yortzeit, Gimel Cheshvan, Zechusa Yogein Aleinu. This week's Parsha, Parshas Lech Lecha, Mefarshim ask, why do we have to have the word Lecha? If the word Lech means like say, go out, and that's basically what he was told. Avraham Avinu was 75 years old, and he was told to go out and to move on for greater and for bigger things. And indeed, the second pasuk of the Seder says, "Ve'escha l'goy gadol va'avorecha v'agad l'shemecha ve'yeh bracha." But why the Lecha? And the Mefarshim say because each and every Yid, when he comes down to Olam Hazeh with his Halak and Neshama, his holy Neshama, he has a purpose and a tafkid in life. And he doesn't know what his mission is, but he has a mission. And when the person, all we can do really is wake up in the morning and wash negel Wasser and say Krishma Bizmana and daven and learn and do chesed and try our best that during the course of the days, the weeks, the years, and the whole lifetime that we will have touched upon our mission and brought it to fruition. So the word Lecha is not because we need it in the pasuk about the concept of going out. That the word Lech is enough. But the Lecha is to accomplish and to fulfill and to bring the beauty and dignity of what you came down to Olam Hazeh for, that it is in its full state of glory and luster during our lifetime, and that we bring it out in its full sense where it has to be. Now, I just mentioned the second pasuk because Avraham Avinu was told, "Ve'escha l'goy gadol." Ze ma she'omrim, the Gemara says, that's what the pasuk means when it says "Ve'escha l'goy gadol." Elokei Avraham, that the Elokei, and then Ve'escha l'goy gadol va'avorecha, and I will bless you, and that's Elokei Yitzchok. Zeh ma she'omrim Elokei Yitzchok. V'agad lo shemecha, that Elokei Yaakov. We start Shemona Esrei, we mention all three: Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, and Elokei Yaakov. And that's the remez in this pasuk. Ve'escha l'goy gadol to Avram, va'avorechecha to Yitzchak, va'agad lo shemecha to Yaakov. But the Gemara says Yochel, and Rashi quotes it. Yochel, you would think that Yehei choismin bekulam, that we should conclude the bracha of Melech Ozer Moshiach Mogein Baruch Atah Hashem Mogein Avraham Yitzchak and Yaakov, like you began Shemona Esrei. Talmud Lomer B'cha Choismen. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Avram, with you I'm going to conclude the bracha, and not with Yitzchak and Yaakov. So the Bnei Yissaschar and many others talk about what does this mean? Does it mean that Hashem had to tell Avraham Avinu, I'm opening the bracha in Shemona Esrei mentioning you, your son, and your grandson. But don't be worried that I'm going to end off the bracha with all three. It's only going to be you. Avraham Avinu couldn't have been happier and possessed more nachas that his son and his grandson would have been together with him at the end of the bracha. But that's not what it's talking about, say all the Mefarshim. That we know that Avraham Avinu was the Midas HaChesed. He personified it, he paved the way for Klal Yisrael to bring it out in its full flourish. Yitzchak was the Amud of Avodah, that he was the pillar and the essence of davening and connecting with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then Yaakov Avinu was Torah. V'Yaakov ishtam yoshev oholim. So you may think that what we had 1,000 years ago when people learned and they didn't miss a minute, we don't have that level of learning today. We have tremendous quantity and quality also, but not the level of quality of what the Vilna Gaon and others were in their tremendous avodas Hashem. And in davening, the Gemara even says that people used to 3 hours take for Shachris and 3 hours for Mincha and 3 hours for We don't find that today, even though we find many immersed in the sea of avodah, of davening, beautifully, and giving over themselves, their minds, their words, their hergish, everything to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but it's not the same level as it was then. But chesed of Avraham is not only equal to whatever was, but it even superseded. And that's what it means. B'cha choismin, I will finish and conclude the shalshelis, the chain of all generations. Before Mashiach comes, that last one will be b'cha choismin, we will be choisim, we will conclude all of the generations of the world and usher ourselves into the time of the Shnas Geula v'Yeshua, that Mashiach will come, that the level of chesed that Klal Yisrael will be incomparable, and you will not be able to be ashamed in the slightest way that we're not as good as the generation chesed of 300 years ago or 600 years ago or 1,500 years ago. B'cha choismin. Now, in our Sedra, we have the First World War that ever took place. We know that there were 4 kings that went out and fought with the 5 kings. And the 4 kings won. They beat the 5. And Vayavo Hapolit and Og Melech HaBashan, who remained after the flood because he held on to the ark, to the Teva of Noach, and he survived. And the pasuk in our Sedra says that when this world war began, that the polit, that like the Sheres HaPleta, the one left over, meaning he was left over from the Mabul, he came to Avraham and he said, you should know that your nephew Lot was taken captive. And Avraham Avinu immediately went out, and the Mefarshim asked, why was he so concerned? Avraham Avinu, I mean, Lot, later on when Avraham Avinu went down, there was a ra'ov, there was a famine. He went down to Mitzrayim, and Lot went with him, and he went down, the Medrash says, as a tzaddik. But the 3 months that Avraham Avinu stayed in Mitzrayim, Lot was hanging around 42nd Street. It was Ervas Haaretz, and he got sucked in, he got pulled in to the atmosphere, and he came back a Russia Marusha, and that's why he chose to go to Sodom. And even though the pasuk says that it was an issue of space, it was an issue of what was fertile for their tremendous flocks, but Rashi brings the Chazal that it was all a cover-up. he wanted to be in Sodom for the immorality. And this was just a cover-up, what he was saying, because it didn't pass to say he wanted the immorality. But that was his kavanah. So the question asked is, why did Avraham Avinu put himself into a sakana, a sakana to save? I mean, he was going up against 4 armies. And whether it was 20,000 people or 40,000, he went out, the pasuk says, Vayorek es chanichov, he went out with 2 opinions. Either 18 warriors with him, or it means Eliezer, that the gematria of the name Eliezer is 318. Why would he put himself into such a sakana? And also, the Gemara asks, what do these words mean? Vayorek es chanichov, that he prepared his camp. So Rav says that it means that harikon bezohov, that he showered them. They were tzaddikim, but he showered them, Rav holds, with Torah. With Torah, the schus HaTorah, and he drenched them with Torah, that they were coming in at a height to fight the army, the 4 armies. And Rabbi Yochanan says, Arikin Bezov, that these were tzaddikim gemurim, but Avraham Avinu was afraid that they would be susceptible, that they would come and they were tzaddikim, they didn't have money, and that they were going to come into the 4 armies, to these cities, and see all the diamonds and the emeralds and the rubies and the sapphires and the gold and the silver. They would be overwhelmed, and they would be entrenched in the temptation. So before he went out with them, Rabbi Yochanan holds, he took these rubies and all of the gold and started throwing at them, that they each had 2 bushel baskets filled with these precious gems. So now they had the taste of wealth, that they wouldn't be overwhelmed by the wealth of these towns and of these armies as they came in. But the question is still, why would Avraham Avinu do this? And the Medrash even says that he went in with such emunah, and he wasn't a fool. He knew that he was coming up against the tens of thousands. But the Medrash says he bent over and he took a handful of sand and he threw it at the army, and the sand became spears. Spears. And it started killing the people. He bent over and took a handful, and he went down and took another handful, and another handful. So it didn't make a difference, the fact that he had Eliezer with him or the 318 men. Because if it was a regular fight, b'derech hateva, he never would have been able to succeed. But what was his motivation? Because the Medrash says that Avraham Avinu and Lot looked exactly like 2 twins. And Avraham Avinu said that they're going to taina that I am the one that they took captive because I look exactly like Lot. And if they're going to say that, it's going to be a chil Hashem. Because the whole world knew Hashem promised me Eretz Yisrael, promised me I'm going to have children, promised me this and that. And here he is, that they have him captive, sitting in a cell. So it will be a terrible chillul Hashem. And that was the reason he felt compelled to set the record straight. Number one, that it wasn't him. But number two, that he would still succeed, and that all of the promises of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to him and to his children would end up happening, and they couldn't question HaKadosh Baruch Hu's koyach or plan in any which way. Now, there is a story, a short story that I want to share with you with Rav Schwab. He was the assistant Rav of Rav Breuer in the Washington Kehila, and I was once there for a Shabbos at a Simcha as a Bacher. I had just come to Torah V'das. I don't know if I was 14 or I was 15, but I ended up the guest of someone in Washington Heights, and I davened there, and to see the 1,200 talisim in the shul, the sea of people, it was magnificent. And to see on one side Rav Breuer sitting and Rav Schwab on the other. And then when Rav Breuer was nifter, Rav Schwab, as we all know, became the main Rav of that Kehila. But before that, he was a Rav in Baltimore, and before that, he was a Rav in Europe. Now, during the Nazi occupation, like in 1938, they had a lot of Muslim snitchers, informers in the shul, in every shul, who used to wear the talis and tefillin, and then if they heard anything, they would report it to the government. Now, Rav Schwab was giving a drosha in his shul in Germany, and he said, when he was speaking about the Catholics, that they claimed that for certain things, a regular person cannot beseech God, their God or whatever, but they have to go through the priest. And Rav Schwab said that we, in German, he said, we don't need a mittler. Mittler means an interceder. In other words, that's someone, an intermediary, to go to HaKadosh Baruch Hu on our behalf. The simplest of Jews could take the Tillim or the Siddur and pour out their hearts to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and whether it's the greatest Yid, the biggest tzaddik, or the smallest, that he can be heard by HaKadosh Baruch Hu equally. And the word is mittler, an intercediary, in other words, an intermediary of someone who's going on behalf. So the informer who was in his shul went to the things, and he said, the rabbi was saying, who needs Hitler? So they called in Rav Schwab, and Rav Schwab said, I never said anything about Hitler. I said mittler, which means an intermediary between the human being and HaKadosh Baruch Hu and God. So they questioned him, and they said, we'll let you know the outcome. And Rav Schwab, for 8 weeks, did not know what's going to be with him. Because if they wanted to throw the book at him, they would arrive during the middle of the night, take him out to his backyard, and hang him. And that's what he thought there was a possibility it was going to happen. So every night for the 8 weeks, he wore his black suit when he went to sleep. He didn't put on his pajamas or whatever he wore for sleeping. And he explained to his family, because if indeed they would show up and want to hang him, and they would hang the people and leave them there for a day, a week. It wasn't so simple to just take the person down and bury him. So for the covet of the Rabbanis, he didn't want a Chillul Hashem that people would be walking by the Rav of the city and he'd be hanging there in pajamas. So he wore his full dress, his black suit, his tie, and that's how he slept. That if they came in and grabbed him, that's how he would be outside. An example of not wanting to make a Chillul Hashem and to be very keen and sensitive to every movement that can have a ripple effect in the negative. And that is avoiding Chillul Hashem and being Mekadesh Shem Shamayim Berabim. Now, we know that when we began to speak about Og Melech HaBashan, Og Melech HaBashan, the Medrash says openly, was not there to do an act of kindness and let Avraham Avinu know that his nephew was taken captive. His intention was that Avraham Avinu for sure will run out to try to do something and he's going to be killed. How could he stand up against 20, 30, 40,000 soldiers of the four armies? He'll be killed, and I will then be able to marry Sarah. So says the Medrash. And he didn't plan on what was going to be. But the point, when I said to you that Rabbi Yochanan holds that they threw money, these were tzaddikim gemurim. Why was Avraham Avinu, according to Rabbi Yochanan, worried about these tzaddikim would come into a city of the armies and see all the gold and silver and be influenced and tempted by it, that he had to throw to them bushel baskets for each one of the 318 of gems, priceless gems. But the answer, the Meforshim say, yes, they were tzaddikim. But sometimes something can catch the fancy and catch the thirst of a person in a moment they were going to war. These tzaddikim thought they were going to go to war. Avraham Avinu didn't know what the outcome was going to be. He just had the 100% emunah that it was going to come out correctly. But he was afraid that as human frailty shows its ugly side sometimes, that these tzaddikim gemurim would be infatuated by the level of the wealth that was there, and they would fall in. And what is the message to us? That we start noble missions throughout our lives in a very dynamic, sincere way. But along the way, the Yetzer Hara has lots of plans to detour us off the path to the mission and become infatuated with something, somehow, somewhere. And that we have to ask siyata dishmaya when we take on a good mission and the person thinks, well, look, of course I'll have siyata dishmaya. I'm doing a good thing. It's costing me time. It's costing me effort. It's costing me energy. It's costing me money. everything. Don't think that we are not susceptible. We have to put siyogim. We have to make sure that we are mentally protected and that we are physically ready for the encounters of determent, which are detriment to our mission. Now, at the end of the story, of course, Avraham Avinu, as we know, succeeded, and he got back Lot. And the Melech Sodom came to him and said, take everything, but give me back the people. And Avraham Avinu said, Im michut viad sroch na'al. If from a thread to a shoelace on the shoe, I will not take that much from you that you should be able to say that you enriched me. And he said it with such a thrust that it opened up the well springs of Emunah to a point that the Gemara says that for that statement about a thread and about a shoelace, he was zoicha for Klal Yisrael to the mitzvah of chalitza and yibum, which deal with a shoe and taking off the shoe, and tzitzis, because he just said the word michut, from a thread, and tzitzis looks like threads. And he was zoicha in the Mishkan and the Bais Hamikdash to the chut hasikra, which was the mitzvah of having a demarcation on the mizbeach of the blood that was on top and blood on the bottom. He was zoicha to that mitzvah of chut hasikra. He was zoicha to the mitzvah of aliyah l'regel. And there were like 10 mitzvahs that he was zoicha to from that one statement. Im michut ve'ad sroch nal. So, when the pasuk says that when he said this to the king, he said, "Harimoisi yodi lekel elyon." I pick up my hands and I make a shavua, not just a promise, a shavua. Ta'akadosh Baruch Hu, that I will not touch an item, I will not take anything. The Bais Yisrael, who was one of the three brothers, the three famous brothers who became Ger Rebbes in Eretz Yisrael, the Bais Yisrael said on this pasuk that when he lifted up of his hands and he said, "Harimoisi yodi lekel elyon," that we learned, just like I said, that he made a shavu, he's not taking anything. But the Bais Yisrael said that he was talking to his hands. When he picked up his hands, he was saying to his hands that you, my hands that want to say, Koichi v'oitzem yodi, that I beat this war. I mean, look, I went out against 4 armies and I succeeded. Never am I saying that and even claiming the slightest credit of anything, so says the Bais Yisrael. But the And these mitzvahs that were given with the security of being watched. The Medrash says that there were 2 very rich brothers that lived in the city of Ashkelon at the time of the Bais Hamikdash, and they used to go up every single year for Aliyas Haregel to Yerushalayim. And next door to them, and they were very wealthy, and next door to them lived a non-Jew, a goy. And he said, the Medrash tells us, that when they go up this year to Yerushalayim, I'm going into their house and I'm going to rob the house because they got such valuable things there. So the Medrash says that when Yom Tov started the first day, the goy went to the house and he sees the two brothers inside walking around. So he figured that they didn't go up yet for Aliyas Haregel. They probably are going to go the next day. Maybe somebody is sick, maybe. But he went back every single day, and every day he saw the brothers walking in the house. And after Yom Tov, the brothers came back from Yerushalayim, and they brought a souvenir, the Medrash says, for this neighbor from Yerushalayim. So when they saw him and they gave him the souvenir, he asked them, "What's this?" So they said, "Well, you know, we go up every year, 3 times a year to Yerushalayim, and we were just there for the holiday, for the Yom Tov, but we brought you back a souvenir." So the Medrash says that he went outside this goy and he benched. He said, Klal Yisrael are lucky that they have the Father, and he understood that Min HaShamayim, that there were just the appearance of the brothers. They were in Yerushalayim, but it looked like they had not gone to protect the valuables of everything. And it says in the pasuk, Lo Yechmad Ish, that there will be no jealousy and that you will not suffer by being away, that you're going to be prey to the jealousy and you will be robbed, and that there's like a havtacha for it. And he blessed HaKadosh Baruch Hu that the Jewish people have such a matana of his protection. But after this whole story with Avraham Avinu and with the Melech Sodom, as I just told you, he didn't want to take anything. But then Avraham Avinu said to the Melech Sodom, Rak, Oner, Eshkol, Umamre, my 3 good friends who went to help me and were part of the entourage with my group of people, they should take, because the rule is that when someone succeeds in a war, so the booty, the spoils of the war belong to the victor. So Avraham Avinu wanted to go a step above and beyond. He was allowed to take, and that was the rule of the game of war. But he was machmir. He wanted to be extra safe on himself, that he didn't benefit anything from it. But it was a chumrah. He could have taken as much as he wanted. But says the Chofetz Chaim on this, what I just said to you, that Avraham Avinu didn't want to take on himself. He wanted to be machmir. That Yidden for all the generations, when you want to be machmir on yourself and you want to take on new restrictions and new limitations, but it's not the halacha, it's something you want to do for yourself to increase your status in kedusha and prishos and whatever you're doing, but not at the expense of someone else. In other words, a husband could want to stay up all night and say tikkun chatzos. He can't have his wife stay up and bring him a coffee and a tea and not sleep properly because he wants to stay up. And it ripples, the ripple effect into all aspects of our lives. That we have in our daily lives, things we do, we go the extra mile for our Kodesh Baruch Hu, and it is something above and beyond, and it is beautiful, but for yourself. You can't impose chumrah on someone else. So says the Chofetz Chaim on this vort. Now, the Meforshim are quick to point out that when it says that the Polit, Og Melech HaBashan, came to tell Avraham that Lot was taken captive, so it says, Vayavo HaPolit, Vayaged li Avram HaIvri. Now, the first time that we see the word Ivri, Hebrew, we're called Hebrews because of this word Ivri. And this is the first time that it appears. And what does Ivri mean? It means opposite. That means Avraham Avinu was standing here with his beliefs and with everything that was his backbone and his life. But the rest of the world stood on the opposite side. They mocked him, in their disbelief, and they took strong issue with him. And the Meforshim ask, it seems to be something diametrically opposed, because the Medrash is full of stories of how he and Sarah went out to the people, and they were mingling with the people for the purpose to influence them and bring them tachas kanfei hashchina, and to bring them to be able to effectively affect their lives. And they succeeded with thousands of them. So Ivri means like standing alone. So the Meforshim, was he a loner? Or was he running around mixing with the people and dealing with thousands of people? So the Meforshim say it's not a contradiction, because you can be with a position and a posture which you can have the whole world disagree with you, but your backbone and your spine is of cement in your conviction. And the fact that you deal with people who are busy serving idols, and you're dealing with them and you're mixing with them and you're feeding them, doesn't mean that you're giving up on your principles. You're trying to effectuate a change in them. But that doesn't mean it was a contradiction, that he wasn't a loner in his belief system and his posture together with Sarah. They were of one thought and one set of principles and mind, and he indeed was the Ivri. And that's why we are called Yehudim to this point, representing Yehuda, who was willing to admit his guilt, and that's again stepping aside from what most people would do to protect their reputations. Now, HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Avraham Avinu that he is going to have a nation, and he's going to have Eretz Yisrael. And Avraham Avinu answered, it sounds great, but what does it mean that I'm going to have all the land? I'm going to have Eretz Yisrael if I have no children? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, that you go outside and take a look at the stars. And you can't count the stars because the stars are so many. Thousands and thousands of stars. You can't count it. Ko yihi zarecha. So will be your children. Now, Meforshim say that in the pasuk of Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, there are 25 letters. And what the Rabbanu Shalom was saying to Avraham Avinu is that just like to count the stars is impossible, your children are going to come into impossible situations. But ko yihi zarecha, the Mesiras Nefesh of Krishma, in the morning and at night, that men have a mitzvah aseh dioraisa of Zman Krishma, of in the morning. There's a time that you have to say Krishma by to get the mitzvah aseh of b'shachpecha uvekumecha, that we have the mitzvah of saying Shema in the morning and in the evening. And in the evening, Tulchatzos, and in the morning it's a Zman Krishma, that Ko Yihi Yezarecha, those Ko, the impossibilities of counting the stars and the things that they're going to encounter with the crusades and with the expulsions and with the difficulties of being a Yid, till Mashiach will come. But the Ko Yi Zarecha, that will embolden them and strengthen them to be able to swim against the current and to take on the challenge of the time, to be able to survive in their Yiddishkeit. Now we know that Avraham Avinu, the Medrash says, told HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you know I can't have children. I was born under a group of constellation in the east, and in that constellation in the east you can't have children. So the Medrash says that's pshat in the pasuk, Vayotze osa hachutza, that he took him outside of that constellation and put him under the constellation in the west. So now he was able to have children. And it went so far that Meforshim say that if you will have the patience to remember that when we come to Parshas Vayeshev, with Yosef being sold by his brothers and coming down to Mitzrayim, and then the wife of Potiphar wanted to seduce Yosef HaTzadik, and he withstood the Nisoyan. But in that story, if you look at the Psukim, it says, Vayetze vayonos hachutza, that Yosef HaTzadik ran outside. Now, if it says vayonos, vayetze and vayonos, we understand that he ran away from the situation. Why does the pasuk have to say hachutza, outside? And it says it 4 times. The word hachutza in that parsha. Add it up and you'll see. So the Meforshim say that where did Yosef get the strength? We know that his father's image appeared in the window and all of that, but Meforshim also stress that when Avraham Avinu went, Vayotze osa hachutza, that he implanted the ability that Yosef should drag himself outside with that hachutza. that he was imbued with the power Maisa Avos Simen Labanim, that he was able to go out and to run out and to withstand the temptation, that he drew down the strength from Avraham Avinu when HaKadosh Baruch Hu Vayotze Osa HaChutza, that at that time when he changed constellations, he was able to draw down the power to be able to withstand that nisoyon that he had, and it made a difference for all of Klal Yisrael, because even when Klal Yisrael left Mitzrayim after all of everything they had to endure and live through, that when it came to the Yam said, oh no, I am not splitting my water. For what? Klal Yisrael wants me to do it for them. The Mitzrayim served idols, and so did the Jews. So in what's chus? They're not better than the Mitzrayim. So the pasuk says that Hayom Ro'ah Vayonos, that Yosef HaTzadik ran out and did not do the Aveirah. So for Yosef HaTzadik, the waters split. But not because of the Shivtei Kor, because of the Klal Yisrael, but it was the schus of Yosef HaTzadik. And he drew that down from our pasuk of this week's Sedra and Lech Lecha, Vayonos, that Vayotze Osa HaChutza, that Chutza gave him the spine and the backbone to withstand that terrible temptation. Now, I want to conclude with a pasuk that we find that Avram and Lot, it says that the shepherds of Lot and the shepherds of Avram could not get along together. And they had to split up, and it didn't work out very well. And the pasuk says, "V'lo yochlu losheves yachtov," that they were not able to dwell together. And then the pasuk gives us the reason why they couldn't dwell together. Ki rechusham rav, because they had so much possession of cattle and things that they were just bumping in and rubbing into each other. And there were problems that Avraham Avinu's shepherds were telling off Lot's that they were busy stealing and they were doing wrong things. And they didn't like that they were being mussered and that they were being told what to do and what not to do. So the pasuk says they couldn't dwell together because they had such possessions, cattle and other things, that they couldn't live together. And then the pasuk comes back and ends, V'lo yochlu losheves yachtov. Now, the pasuk began that they couldn't dwell together. And it even gives us the reason. Ki haya rechusham rav. Why does the pasuk have to come back and end that pasuk with the exact same words that it said in the beginning of the pasuk? V'lo yochlu losheves yachtov. We got that message and we got the reason. Why repeat it? So the Mefarshim say a very insightful thought that is a thundering message to each and every one of us. Because many times there is a problem that arises in a community, in a family. And they seek a solution. And they come out with a solution. But they never nipped it in the bud. So it is still lingering and festering after they come up with the solution. And a Rav or a father of children in a family has the responsibility of not only solving the problem of today, but to see that it uproots, the solution uproots and nips in the bud what brought about the problem. Otherwise, it festers and stays around forever. Their families, they're busy fighting that the father died, and the whole issue was over the last $10,000. And what did they do? They settled it, but they were still angry. So the children and the cousins didn't go to the bar mitzvahs and didn't go to the chasa. Go break up an entire family. The most important possession that a mishpacha has is the family. And over here, to take an issue and break up the family, because whenever they walked away from the Yerusha issue, they did not uproot the anger and the hate and the disdain that came about because of the fighting. So when two children hate each other and the father steps in, he not only has to wipe away the issue of the day, but he has to have them learn together with him. He has to take them out to a park, play with them. He has to do things to see that he uproots the bad will. And as a matter of fact, in a couple of weeks, you find by Yitzchak that his workers, that they came to a well and they fought with the Roe Gror. And the pasuk says that they called the well Asek, ki hisasku imo, because they had this Asek. The Roe Yitzchak had with the Roe Gror this issue that they dealt with each other, so they named the well Asek because they had to deal with each other to solve the problem. But then they came to another well, and they called it Sitna, hate, because they were still fighting over there. Sitna, but it does, by the first well, it tells you the reason. Ki hisasku imo. They called it Asek because they were dealing with each other, and that's why they gave it the name Asek. But by Sitna, they don't say what the problem was or what the issue was. They just say that they called it Sitna, hate, because they hated each other. But it doesn't say because they hated each other. It just says Sitna, and we understand that it was highlighted because of the hate between them. That's when you do not go back. You think, oh, I solved it, Shalom al Yisrael. Don't forget, the last thing we say in benching is Hashem Yevarech Esamo Vashalom. The last bracha in Shemona Esrei is Sim Shalom. That Shalom is the backbone of Klal Yisrael. You can't have machloikis and thrive with Yiddishkeit. You have to go out of your way, and sometimes it's a bitter pill. I'm going to go apologize after how he... But if we can put ourselves into the proper frame of mind and bring out the best of the situation, and it's not easy, and sometimes you have to suffer abuse to get to the desired result. But at the end, Hashem Yevarech Es Amo Vashalom.